Bobby, welcome to the podcast, Bobby Morelli, returning guest. Bobby, we had you on last time, I think, to talk about some of the scents and fragrances surrounding the Bond franchise.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
And it's great to have you back this time round. We're going to be talking about some of the timepieces that are involved with the Bond franchise.
Correct.
It's such a welter of a subject, right? So much to talk about. If you just want to talk about the watches of Bond, I think we could do maybe like a 10-part series of something like this.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me back, Pete. I always enjoy chatting with you. And I'm sorry Matt isn't here this time. I know he's getting ready for his nuptials, which is great.
Yeah.
So congratulations to Matt. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So it's very good to be here. Yeah. The watches, I think, are one of those things that even like casual Bond fans, they know the cars, they know the girls, they know the watches, they know the martini. It's like the watch is such like an integral part of what makes James Bond. Yeah, I think you could probably do an episode for every single movie and every single watch he's worn. And I know as we were kind of getting ready for this episode, I kind of wanted to look and see, okay, what are some of those like really key watches in the franchise and in the films and in the books, and kind of what Fleming's influence was there, and then come up with maybe some alternatives, maybe not direct copies. You know what I mean? Yeah. So some things that are kind of like really nice, respectable watches at different price points, because not everybody is looking to invest, thousands and thousands of dollars in a watch, and that's cool.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things. Now, I've only got a modicum of knowledge when it comes to Bond watches. It's one of those areas, like you say, that you're either... Because it's so big, I feel like it's like Star Trek. I've never seen an episode of Star Trek. Now, it's probably way too late to get into Star Trek. It's the same with watches. If I now want to get into get granular with watches, I have to take on a lot of backstory, don't I?
Yeah, and I tell you what, there are people that know far more than I do. So, you know what I mean? I don't pretend to be an expert on every caliber and every movement and things like that. The people that know way more than I do. But, I think I know enough to be dangerous, maybe. And, it's something that I've always kind of liked. And I think it's like we talked about last time with the fragrances or the clothes you talk about all the time. I think watches can be an aspirational purchase and something that Dave Zaritsky talks about. It's kind of like the invisible part of the hobby. So you can wear a watch that has that connection to Bond, but it's not like so overt. Yeah. So watches can kind of be fun. And I think too, for most guys, it's like there aren't a whole lot of acceptable pieces of jewelry, I think, that a guy can wear. Maybe a necklace, bracelet, you know what I mean? It's like if you can wear a watch, and that's something you can wear during the day, you can wear that casually, you can wear that out to dinner, and that's something that really you can wear kind of all the time, that kind of becomes one of your key pieces. And I think what's really cool to me is that a watch is something that you can pass down. You know what I mean? So it's one of the things that my dad has is his father's Omega watch from the 50s. And that's something that's a part of my grandfather that's still here. So to me that's kind of cool too.
And I think you posted that recently on your Instagram, right?
I did.
And that's by the way, if people aren't aware of Bobby online, it's Matched Perfectly on Instagram. From the blog matchedperfectly.us, I think, where we can find you telling stories over there. But so that kind of leads me on to a question that I had chambered. Are watches a generational thing specifically? Because I worked it out why I'm not particularly a watch dude. It's because my dad wasn't a watch guy. I never really had anything handed down, and my dad wasn't into jewelry. So I'm thinking watches are like snooker or cricket or a geeky British sport. Now, if your dad gets it into you really early, then you're hardwired in. That's it. You're into watches. But if you miss that generational gap, it's almost something that passes you by.
I think there could be some of that, but I would flip it to you and say, was your dad really hardcore into tailoring and fashion and things like that?
He had an eye on fashion. He knew what he liked, but he didn't really go out and dress to impress, if you know what I mean.
I think it's one of those things, like my dad he's not big into fashion. He's not super into watches. I think it's one of those things, definitely passion I inherited from my dad are cars, like definitely into cars. And that's something my dad and I share very much. But I think the watches, I think it's like when you grow up like we have, like idolizing Bond And that's always such a key part of really any movie, whether, the alarm is rather loud or whether that's Sir Roger's buzzsaw bezel cutting through things and live and let die. It's like that's such an integral part of that. I think as a Bond fan, I think you end up gravitating towards that. I thought you were going to ask, it's interesting now with how prevalent smartwatches are now, and what does that mean for kind of, the traditional, automatic watches or even quartz watches. And I don't know, to me, I'm more traditionalist, I guess. I like a traditional watch as opposed to a smartwatch. And I know there's so many cool benefits with that, so I'm not bagging on that. If that's something you're into, cool. For me, I guess I'm a little more traditional.
Yeah, I think that was actually a slight sidebar, but one of the issues with the latest Kingsman film, they broke away from their watch sponsor because they didn't have any smart or tech integrated into the watch that they needed for the sequel. So they had to move away. Now, what's the name of the brand? Was it Tag or screw it? I'll edit in post. I know what it was, but they had to move away from the watch that was in the original. And when it came to the second one, they didn't have any tech. So they said, right, we'll have to go with such and such.
I'm not an expert on that franchise. I've seen the first one. I think Tag does have a smartwatch, for what that's worth. I don't know. And I think that
I'll have to dial back and figure that out.
Yeah, I don't know.
Luckily, I know less about Kingsman than I do about Bond, so I think people are getting the fun of this. So, Bobby, let's shall we go through some of the watches that you sent through to me? And by the way, we'll put all the links and the pictures to these. I'll put something in the show notes over on my blog, which is humanresearch.xyz. Bobby, I'm not sure if you wanted to do anything over on yours, but people can find you over there.
I'll be posting some photos on the Match Perfectly Instagram. I do that every now and then of the watches. So to me, that's cool, and sharing kind of that passion and hobbies, definitely cool. So I'll be posting some photos there.
Great.
To me, the way I looked at this topic is rather than go through film by film, and this is what Sean wore in Dr. No, and this is what Sean wore in Thunderball, and this is what Roger wore in Live and Let Die, and this is what Tim, it's like that's too broad. So to me, I think there's some key pieces from the cinematic series. And that the great debate is always, is it Rolex or is it Omega? Is it Rolex or is it Omega? And I think, Fleming was himself a Rolex fan, and he wore an early Explorer 1, 1016 model Explorer 1 was he wore many watches, but that was one of the ones that he wore and gravitated to. And I know whether this is an accurate quote, it's attributed to Fleming saying if he was going to wear a watch, it had to be a Rolex. Right. Talking about Bond. So I think the literary Bond definitely wears Rolex. And from my research and understanding, Rolex never paid to be part of the film series. They didn't pay for that. The other thing that is kind of lore is the watch that Sean is wearing in Dr. No in those early films was actually Cubby's watch that was loaned to him. So I don't how much truth there is to that. I don't know. I guess that would make sense because I know a lot of those early films were done not on the biggest of budgets. So I could see probably everything you hear about Cubby was super generous. So I could see him taking the watch off and saying, "Well, just wear this. It seems to look the part." So, I think early on, whether it's just by chance that Cubby happened to wear a Rolex, that was just sort of injected into the series. And I think, with Fleming still being alive, maybe he had some influence there as well. So those early Submariners, are still super coveted. They're, that's sort of the grail piece. I think that it was a 6538 Submariner, which is what Sean was wearing in the early films. And, I think that kind of set the tone. Bond being a commander in the Royal Navy, that would make sense that he would have a diver's watch. And, in that time, in the late 50s, early 60s, that was when Jacques Cousteau and the early Aqualung and the early Scuba, that was just a new thing. Yeah. So I think it kind of a product of the times. It was just kind of natural with Bond's, British naval history. I think that's a watch that would make sense.
Sure.
So the way I looked at kind of our topic for today wasn't going through movie by movie, actor by actor, watch by watch. It was more to say, okay, let's look at the category of dive watches and see what might fit the bill at different price points. And I know over at Iconic Alternatives. I don't know if you follow his Instagram or his website.
Is it Ryan
Phenomenal. Phenomenal. Right. Phenomenal. He just did something on some watch alternatives as well. So if you're looking for some, kind of a companion to this, definitely check out the post over there. I think that's within the last couple of weeks. There's some really good alternatives. So to me, the way I wanted to frame this is rather than going, okay, this is a Rolex knockoff or a Rolex homage. It's like, let's go through some different price points because not everybody can afford an $8,000 watch.
Sure.
So the first one that I would recommend, and these are all like, I would say known brands that aren't like, you're crossing your fingers that it shows up from eBay and it still works. So, sticking with brands like Seiko, the first one I recommend is a Seiko watch. It's a Seiko Sport 5 dive watch, $169 US. And I think Pete, you'll probably link to these in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know for our American listeners that you can get these here in the States. I don't know if they ship internationally, but this is a really handsome looking dive watch. It's not trying to be something that it's not. It's not trying to imitate Rolex in any way, shape, or form, but it has that dive watch look to it. So if you're not looking to spend a ton of money, $170 still isn't cheap. It's not a cheapy watch that, you're still, spending some money. I think that's a good place to start. And honestly, I think if you're going less than $100, that falls into you get what you pay for.
And also, this could be like just the everyday watch you have your dress watch, you have your diver's watch that will be perhaps a few grand more than this. Let's say if you do have one in your drawer, you don't want to be rocking that all the time, every time. You want to have something that is a bit more, maybe something you travel with and something a bit more disposable, right?
That's exactly right. So if you're not shedding too many tears if something happens to maybe $170 watch, something happens to a thousands of dollars watch, that's a bit more painful.
Yeah.
So some of these watches, it's not exclusive to saying, oh, I already have my Grail watch and I don't want something lesser than that. I think there are fantastic watches across all price points that truly, like, you can still enjoy. You can enjoy your Rolex, you can enjoy your Seiko. I don't think they're mutually exclusive at all.
Yeah.
So that was the first one. If someone's maybe just looking to get into watches a little bit and doesn't want to shell out too much, I think that $150, $170 price range, I think you'd be hard pressed to find something as good as that Seiko 5.
Nice and accessible. So what's the difference between that, Bobby, and the next one, which is the Seiko SKX 007?
It is the 007 in there. I think this one is a little bit more upscale in terms of the materials used. The particular one I link to, I have no affiliation with this, is longislandwatch.com. And the gentleman that runs this site, evidently, I've done a little bit of research, does an upgraded bracelet on this model. So the bracelet, in addition to the watch, I think just a little bit better workmanship, a little bit better materials, and a little bit more robust of a bracelet on this one. So you're moving up a little bit in price point as opposed to that 150, 170. This one is right in that 350, 360 range US.
Yep.
So what you're getting there is probably a little bit better workmanship and definitely a better bracelet. And you can see a lot of these watches that we're talking about do have a Bond nod. So having that 007 in the name there, clearly inspired by Bond. And I would say all of these aren't necessarily the same, same 40 millimeter size as a sub. These aren't, it's not exact. That's not the point. There are plenty of those out there. So if you're looking for something, more of a Submariner or Omega Planet Ocean kind of copy or homage, there are plenty of those. Yeah. These are kind of their own thing, and I think that's what's cool about them. These have the details of a dive watch in the spirit of what Bond would wear, but maybe a little bit less of a price point.
So Matt, now time for the show's sponsor. This show is sponsored by Strix, and these are the products that we've been sent, and we have tried and tested these products. They are very sleek, very elegant. Cosmetic company, little concealer pen here. Look at that. You just take the lid off. Like I mentioned in the podcast, got this through security. Now, just twist it at the end. Matt, this actually feels very Bondian, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's, I think, I mean, we don't see James Bond on screen without any cosmetics, do we?
Right, exactly. I mean, you think Daniel Craig is all good to go, doesn't have to sit in the makeup chair for a couple of hours making sure everything looks good. So imagine you're out and you need to get a decent picture, and you want to get a picture of yourself in front of The Puppy by Jeff Koons in the Guggenheim Museum, but you've got a blemish, you've got a spot, that's something that's just turned up overnight. Well, look at this bad boy. You just take that out, and then take the hit off that, and away you go. So Strix, they're sponsoring the show. We've got a special discount. It's 25% off. The code is BOND25. And if you want to support the podcast, you want to support the show, make sure everything stays free, keeping all the free content, then head over to Strix, STRYX.com. Tell them we sent you. Use the discount code and try out these products. They're supporting us, so you should support them. Do you know what I really like when I look through the product details of watches like this? Are words like deployment clasp.
yeah.
Those are the only things you find with watches and copywriting and stuff like that. I love that.
It's funny, things like that too. Like I know, some of the Planet Ocean that Daniel Craig wears, like the Quantum of Solace is a Planet Ocean Seamaster 600M, 600 meters. So when you're down 600 meters, that thing will not fail you, Pete, because that's what we all need when we're diving that deep.
When I'm down there and I see it start to go and the bits fall out, then trust me,
that's right.
I'll be sending it back.
You can send it back to Barbara Broccoli. You guys are close.
Yeah,
friends.
Well, she's got my details now. Still expecting a phone call, but what the hell is this thing?
Yeah. So the details are always fun to listen
to. So I'm jumping ahead here, but I think it's the Squall watches. Am I saying that right?
It's Squale. It's Italian for shark, interestingly enough. So we'll jump ahead a little bit. So the price point on this one, I think if you're looking for a really, really nice Submariner alternative, this is where you want to go. Squale has a really rich history of dive watches. From early on, they manufactured cases for brands like Tag Heuer and bracelets for some various Swiss brands. This is a Swiss movement. It's an Italian brand, but it's made in Switzerland. Really, really high quality. This one's a little bit more, so we're jumping now from about the 350, 360 price range US to about 550, 570 US. This one is really nice, though, in terms of materials. It's really nice, high quality stainless steel. It's got a ceramic unidirectional turning bezel, which a lot of the new Rolex watches have. So this is a very, very high quality piece, and you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. And again, I go to this one because it's not a Rolex knockoff. Squale in and of itself, in their own right, has a really storied history in terms of dive watches. And I think this one, like if you're looking to spend less than $1,000, this is where I would go. This one's super nice, super interesting. I like this watch a lot.
Nice. And also I think people, when they look for watches and they start to get above a price point that is maybe above their pay grade, would you say they specifically want to get something that has Swiss movement in it?
I think so.
It gives them that reassurance, would you think?
It does, but I tell you what, there's some really wonderful, like Grand Seikos that have some really wonderful Japanese movements. So I think there is something, with, brand cachet or whatever to have a Swiss movement and a Swiss watch. And they are beautiful watches, but there's some really great German movement watches. There's some really great Japanese movement watches. So I think some of it is, again, it goes back to that aspirational, that sometimes like the only watch that will scratch that itch is an Omega or it's a Rolex. I think those are things that sometimes you aspire to achieve that. And oftentimes I think watches are a great way to mark milestone achievements. Maybe that's the birth of a child. Maybe that's a big promotion at work, what have you. Maybe that's getting married, things like that. And that way it becomes sentimental. Yeah. I think those are things that, as a gentleman, you can wear that every day and be reminded of those things.
Yeah, that's nice. And it's like you say, there's always a bit of emotion attached, especially in the films. I mean, we'll go off piece a bit again, but like not necessarily with the Bond films. I don't really think he has a lot of emotion attached to a watch because he gets a different one every film, pretty much. But like you'll have the Pulp Fiction, which is one that I always think of first. Yeah. The emotion with that watch. Or you'll have like the emotion, even in Speed. He goes, "Oh, it was the watch that led him to me, wasn't it?" And you think, absolutely, it's always in the films, isn't it?
Totally, it totally is. You think about like Apollo 13, where they're timing the burns off of their Omega Speedmasters and things like that. It's like a lot of times that's such an integral part of the story. It's people do tie a lot of emotion to that. Totally off tangent. I know within the last year or so, the Rolex Daytona that Paul Newman wore was auctioned off for something ridiculous, like $20 million or something like that. So people have a passion for that, and certainly with the lineage of who's wearing it, certainly becomes even more so.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know what? Even though I said that there's no emotion attached, I wonder if I'll get any tweets about how when George Lazenby pulls out the watch from the drawer in the office, doesn't he? And then kind of So I take that back. There is a bit of emotion involved, but I think
there is. It's funny you talk about the films too. You think about that train scene on Casino Royale where he first meets Vesper, and she's the one that looks at the watch, whatever it is, inexpensive watches, and she's the one that says Rolex, and he corrects her, no, it's an Omega.
Yeah.
So to me, there is that play, and he's very aware of what he's wearing too. So maybe he doesn't always show that emotional attachment, but clearly he's passionate about that.
Yeah. Yes, that's always a nice one. The product placements are getting all the more interesting, aren't they? Well, and how they actually write them into the films.
That one is always interesting to me, knowing I always think what it must be like for Rolex, thinking we didn't pay a dime to be in this movie and we still get mentioned.
That's true. Yeah.
Think about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So and I always think too the main Bond girl in that is assuming it's a nice watch and assuming it's a Rolex.
Yeah, I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah,
I think Amiga are thinking of it like a one-upmanship, aren't they? And perhaps they're just forgetting the fact that Rolex are getting something for free out of it.
Correct. I always found that kind of interesting. So again, that Squally watch, I don't think there's a better option for a Bond-esque dive watch under $1,000. So now we're getting kind of into some more expensive territory. These are a little bit more on the investment piece side of things. I looked for some options around $1,000. I think there are probably some good ones to be found. I looked for something kind of unique. The next one is a brand out of the U.S., out of Detroit, called Shinola.
Oh, that's how you pronounce it. Right, great.
Shinola, right. Okay. They started a few years ago now. I want to say maybe 5 years. And I think their whole kind of mantra is, I don't know how much you know about Detroit, Michigan here in the States, but they're going through a bit of a renaissance. And Detroit is a city very depressed with the big three automakers, not, a lot of that work are going offshore. So Detroit is a city, very depressed, very impoverished. And this is a brand, Shinola, that is trying to kind of reinvigorate that. And they've done a nice job. So they've got a line of watches, they've got leather goods, they've got a lot of really cool things going on. And this watch is called the Lake Erie Monster, which is very cool, a very cool watch. It was a limited edition. You can still have them. The link we have up here is to Neiman Marcus. This prices out at about $1,400 US. Very, very cool. This is our first, Shinola's first automatic movement watch. So again, we're moving up a little bit. This is a really gorgeous piece, 43 millimeter, limited edition from a brand that may be a little more under the radar, but still a very cool piece. Definitely something I could see Bond wearing.
It's really nice. Yeah, I remember. I'm familiar with Shinola, although I've pronounced it wrong all these years.
Right. That's the way I say it anyway. I'm assuming that's right.
I'm assuming it's right as well, you being American, Bobby. And I think I spoke to, I forget who it was, for another podcast that I do here in the UK. Menswear Style podcast I haven't done for a while, but I remember speaking to either the press communications guy or someone involved in marketing, and we got them on the podcast, and I said to them, I'm sure you get asked this question all the time, but you guys being based in Detroit, have you got the RoboCop statue up yet? And I think after that,
what was their answer?
They didn't know. Who's going to know the answer? They've been there like researching watches and marketing and statistics. They're not.
That's amazing, though. That's a great question.
That's why they're definitely on my radar, is because of, like you mentioned, the manufacturing in Detroit. I believe they still have the movements are imported. They're Swiss movements.
Correct. That's what I understand as well.
Yeah.
So I as far as I know, it's Shinola, and I feel like you've you've taught me how to pronounce snooker, so I can only repay the favor in terms of Shinola. So I'd say we're even.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. So
we're out of season
here. Very cool piece.
We're out of season here with snooker, so no snooker news for a while. But
I know I'm so disappointed. You have to wait till next season.
Yeah. So for the hordes of emails I get every day saying what's the latest with the snooker, trust me, it's coming 2-3 months time.
Yeah.
Bobby, I haven't got it on my list, but I know that there was another one slightly above.
Yes.
Well, perhaps jumping up the pay grade.
Jumping up the pay grade, and this is one that might be honestly a little bit tough to track down. It's a Tudor watch that is actually owned by Rolex. This is a Rolex not sub brand, that makes it sound less, but a sister brand, I guess is a better way to put it. And the founder of Rolex, Hans Wilsdorf, started this as a somewhat lower price point option. So this has always been, going back to the beginning of Rolex, Tudor has been a sister brand, and they've got some really, really cool things going on in their own right recently. So this Tudor Black Bay 58 is totally inspired by the Dr. No watch. Totally inspired. So there are no crown guards. It's got a big crown on it. It's got a red triangle indicator at 12 o'clock, just like the one in Dr. No. So clearly this one was inspired by the Bond watch, and it is super cool. It is really cool. This is one with Tudor's in-house movement that they're making completely in-house now. This one is an outstanding watch in every sense. This one, again, upscale, that Squale 1400-ish. This one, you're talking 3600 US. But again, if you're looking for something that's a little bit more affordable than a Submariner, this is an absolutely outstanding place to go. This one is certainly something you would pass on to your kids afterwards. Gorgeous watch. Yeah, really cool piece.
Nice. Bobby, I think I've learned something in the conversation here. I'm just, like you were saying earlier, how it's all aspirational, really, these watches. And as you go through the pay grades, these are aspirational. So you kind of look at yourself, look at where you are in life, how much money you're getting in. And it's the watch, really, that you aspire to. That's your next goal, isn't it? So you go through the gears, as it were. Like we've gone through the price points here. Is this the last stop before you would actually go and afford, say, an Omega or a Rolex?
I think so. I think so. And I think, if you're spending $3,600 on a new watch, I would say the watches I am fortunate enough to own, I've got a wonderful dealer I work with in my hometown. Phillipson's Jewelers is the person I work with. They're reputable, they're honest, and I get my watches from them that are not new. So you can, it's just like anything. If you're looking to buy cars or whatever, you can save some money by not having that initial markup. I will tell you, Rolex tends to hold their value really, really well, probably better than an Omega. So if you're looking to get an Omega, if that's what you aspire to get, I would highly recommend finding a reputable secondhand dealer. There's nothing wrong with that. If they're reputable and they have the paperwork and they have kind of the box and the receipts and everything that comes with that, I would have no issue buying something from a secondhand dealer. I do it. The watches I have are all purchased that way. But yeah, I think, if you're looking to spend, close to $4,000 US, you're not that far away from a Rolex or an Omega. I think that's probably the next stop is, getting kind of one of those brands. So I think that's the kind of the last stop on the dive watches. I came across a really, really nice Aquaterra alternative, and that's the watch that Daniel wears. You can see that one a lot in Skyfall. Right. Gorgeous blue face. This one is not a dive watch, more of a dress watch. And this one's beautiful. The Omega itself, they call it a teak style dial. It's kind of got blue gradients on the face. Just a gorgeous watch. And as I was doing research for this episode, I came across a really great Seiko alternative that very much is inspired by that. It's got a similar sort of pattern on the dial. It's a Seiko Prestige automatic, and they call it a tuxedo.
That's
so
right.
Again, yeah. Not to Skyfall. Clearly, this was inspired by that, but it's a beautiful automatic Seiko watch. Runs about $570 US. So again, I don't know what the new Aquaterras are going for, in the thousands for sure.
Well,
so
I had a quick look. It's about four for the
yeah,
Aquaterra over here. Pounds, it's 4,100. I saw in just one supplier online. So
right.
kind of round about the 4K region over here at the moment.
So you're about lopping off a zero.
Yeah,
for that. You know what I mean? So for $570, this piece looks gorgeous. I haven't seen this one in person, but online it looks great. I know Seiko makes an outstanding watch. So again, if you're looking for something that's not a cheapy knockoff and something that really you can feel proud to wear, Seiko's a wonderful watch brand with a nice lineage in and of itself. This is where I would go.
Do you know what?
100%.
I realize now that I left that one out accidentally because it was the same price point as the Squale one, right? So I've jumped ahead, but in a way we've headlined with this because I've picked this out as the one that I actually like the most for $570. I guess the main difference that I'm seeing on the dial face is that you've got the horizontal pins going down.
Correct.
And on the Omega Terra Aquaterra, you've got those like horizontally. Obviously, there's a lot more difference than that, but visually, that's the one that I really picked out.
Sure, but I think that this Seiko has a very striking blue face too, and I think that's one of the things that I really like about that Aquaterra Omega, that it's got a really beautiful blue face. Interesting, this Seiko is almost exactly the same size that Daniel wears, a 38.5 millimeter Aquaterra in Skyfall. This Seiko, I believe, is the same size. So if you're looking for something that's really close at a significant savings, this is where I would go.
Nice. And like I say, we'll leave all the links to these watches so that you can investigate and do a bit of research on your own. Over on my blog, Matt's, like you say, away. When this goes out, I think he will be feet up in a hammock somewhere on the beach of Goldeneye, honeymoon style.
Good for him. Good for him.
But Bobby, thanks so much for taking the time out, getting up at the crack, jumping on the podcast. Bobby Morelli, Matched Perfectly is where you can find him on Instagram. And matchedperfectly.us is where you'll see him share some stories and memories of the watches. So
absolutely,
Bobby, great. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Pete. Pleasure as always. Talk to you soon.
Absolutely.